A millionaire was about to marry the woman his mother chose when suddenly his wife, who had been missing for 10 years, appeared at the gate. He left everything and ran toward her. A greatest ever love story. Please don't skip this story. If you don't want the 30-second introduction, you can skip it, but don't miss the story. I love you like my own family. Hi, my beautiful family. Welcome back to your own family channel. May the Almighty surround you with His endless mercy and cover your hearts with light that never fades. May He bless every woman with strength wrapped in grace, beauty wrapped in dignity, and peace that no storm can shake. May every man walk with kindness, every home glow with harmony, and every child grow in love that feels like sunshine. I pray that every wound finds healing, every dream finds its wings, and every heart in this family feels God's gentle touch tonight. May you rise each morning renewed, protected, and loved beyond measure. If your heart is true, like the video, if your love is real, right, I am with Mr. Peter. 10 years ago, Tommy Brinson learned that a man could lose everything in a single moment: his wife, his soul, his reason to breathe. But he never learned how to stop loving her, even when the world said she was gone forever. The memory lived in him like a second heartbeat. That afternoon, when everything changed, when he first saw her, the gallery opening had been suffocating with pretension and champagne that tasted like expensive regret. Tommy had been ready to leave when he saw her standing before a painting of a thunderstorm. Her head tilted in that particular way people have when they are genuinely moved by art, rather than performing appreciation for an audience. She wore a simple dress the color of midnight, and when she turned, their eyes met across the crowded room. Tommy forgot how to breathe. He walked toward her without thinking, drawn like a man who had been wandering in darkness and suddenly glimpsed light. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" she said, her voice soft and rich. "Like warm honey." "I wasn't looking at the painting," Tommy replied, and the honesty in his voice surprised even himself. She smiled then, and Tommy felt something fundamental shift in his chest. "That's quite a line. It's quite a truth," he answered. Her name was Adina. She told him this while they stood in front of that thunderstorm painting, and Tommy repeated it 3 times, wanting to memorize exactly how it felt on his tongue. They talked for hours that night, long after the gallery closed, sitting on the steps outside while the city moved around them like water around stones. She was an elementary school teacher. She loved children with a fierceness that made her eyes shine when she spoke about them. She read poetry in the bathtub and cried during commercials about puppies. She had a laugh that started soft and built into something uncontrollable and joyful. Tommy told her things he had never told anyone, about the loneliness that lived in his chest despite being surrounded by people constantly, about feeling like he was playing a role in his own life, about the weight of expectations that had been placed on his shoulders since birth. "You don't have to carry all of that alone," she said, and when she touched his hand, Tommy felt the weight lift. They saw each other the next day, and the day after that, and the day after that. Within a week, Tommy understood that spending time apart from Adina felt like holding his breath underwater. She became necessary to him in a way that terrified and exhilarated him in equal measure. One evening, Tommy took her to the roof of his building. He had arranged candles and blankets and a meal he had cooked himself, burning his hand twice in the process. The city spread out below them like scattered diamonds. "This is the most romantic thing anyone has ever done for me," Adina whispered, her eyes reflecting candlelight. "I want to do romantic things for you every day for the rest of my life," Tommy said, and he meant it with every fiber of his being. They danced on that rooftop with no music, just the sound of the city and their own heartbeats. Tommy held her close and understood what people meant when they talked about finding home in another person. 3 months after they met, Tommy woke up in the middle of the night with absolute certainty. He got out of bed, careful not to wake Adina sleeping beside him, and sat by the window watching her breathe. The moonlight painted her skin silver. He wanted to marry her. Not someday, not eventually. Now. The next morning, Tommy took her to the park where they had first held hands. It was raining softly, the kind of gentle rain that makes the world feel clean and new. They were both soaked within minutes, laughing at the absurdity of being outside in a downpour. Tommy knelt right there on the wet grass, pulled out the ring he had been carrying for a week, and said, "Adina, I don't want to spend another day of my life without you being my wife. Marry me, please marry me." She cried and nodded and said yes, and Tommy stood and kissed her while rain ran down both their faces, mixing with her tears until he could not tell where one ended and the other began. They told his mother the next day. Maria Brinson sat in her formal living room, her spine straight as steel, her face a mask of practiced pleasantness that did not reach her eyes. She listened to their announcement with the expression of someone being informed of a minor inconvenience. "How lovely," Maria said in a voice that could have frozen water. "And when did you say you met this girl?" 3 months ago, Tommy replied, his hand holding Adina's tightly. "But when you know, you know." 3 months, Maria repeated, her eyes sweeping over Adina in a way that made Tommy's jaw tighten. "How very impulsive." "It's not impulsive when it's right," Tommy said firmly. Maria smiled without warmth. "Of course, darling. I'm sure you know what you're doing." But Tommy saw the calculation in his mother's eyes. He saw the disapproval. He told himself it did not matter. His mother would come around eventually. She had to. They married quickly, in a small ceremony that Tommy knew disappointed his mother's vision of what a Brinson wedding should be. But Adina looked like an angel in her simple white dress, and when Tommy said his vows, his voice broke with emotion. "I promise to love you in every moment, in every circumstance, for as long as I draw breath," he said, looking into her eyes. "You are my home, Adina. You will always be my home." The wedding reception was tense. Maria moved through the crowd with frozen courtesy, introducing the new Mrs. Brinson to family friends with barely concealed disdain. Tommy heard her describe Adina as sweet, in a tone that made the word sound like an insult. But when he and Adina escaped to their suite that night, none of it mattered. Tommy held his wife in his arms and felt like the luckiest man who had ever lived. "Are you happy?" Adina whispered against his chest. "I have never been happier," Tommy answered truthfully. "You are everything, Adina, everything." They spent their first weeks of marriage in a haze of joy. Tommy would come home to find Adina singing in the kitchen, and he would sweep her into his arms and dance with her, making her laugh. They stayed up until dawn talking about everything and nothing. They made love with an intensity that left them breathless and awed. Tommy's mother remained coldly polite, but Tommy told himself that time would soften her, that she would see what he saw, the kindness in Adina, the gentleness, the strength, that she would eventually love Adina the way Tommy did. For their honeymoon, Tommy planned a trip to Switzerland. He rented a private chalet in the Alps with views that stretched forever. He wanted to take Adina somewhere as beautiful as she was, somewhere they could be completely alone together. The night before they left, they lay in bed with Adina's head on Tommy's chest, his fingers tracing patterns on her shoulder. "Promise me something," Adina said softly. "Anything. Promise me that no matter what happens, you'll remember this feeling. Remember how much we love each other right now." Tommy kissed the top of her head. "I could never forget. This feeling is written into my bones, Adina. You are written into my bones." She held him tighter, and Tommy felt her heartbeat against his ribs. He fell asleep that night with his wife in his arms, peaceful and complete, having no idea that in a handful of days, his entire world would shatter into pieces so small he would never be able to find them all. Chapter 2. The Mother's Hatred. Maria Brinson had perfected the art of cruelty without ever raising her voice. The first family dinner after the wedding set the pattern for everything that would follow. Tommy and Adina arrived at the Brinson estate to find the dining room filled with relatives and family friends. Maria greeted them at the door with a smile that never touched her eyes. "Oh, you're here," Maria said, kissing Tommy's cheek while her gaze slid past Adina as though she were invisible. "Everyone is already seated. Adina, dear, you're down at that end." She gestured vaguely toward the far end of the long table where a single place setting sat isolated from the other guests. Tommy's seat was at Maria's right hand, a dozen chairs away from his wife. "Mother, I'll sit with Adina," Tommy said. "Don't be ridiculous, darling. These are your father's oldest friends. They want to speak with you." Maria's voice carried the kind of steel that Tommy had learned as a child not to challenge. He sat where his mother indicated, and for the next 3 hours he watched Adina eat alone, while conversations swirled around her without including her. She smiled politely whenever anyone glanced her way, but no one did glance her way, not once. Tommy tried to catch her eye, to send some silent message of apology or solidarity, but the distance between them felt vast as an ocean. After dinner, Adina excused herself to use the restroom. Tommy found her there, staring at her reflection in the mirror with eyes that glistened but refused to spill tears. "I'm sorry," he said. "My mother is she needs time to adjust." "She hates me," Adina said simply. "She doesn't hate you. She doesn't know you yet." Adina turned to face him. "Tommy, she seated me alone. She didn't introduce me to anyone. She pretended I wasn't even there. I know, and I'll talk to her." But Tommy did not talk to her. He told himself he would later when the moment was right, when he could find the words that would make his mother understand without making everything worse. The pattern repeated at every family gathering. Maria would greet Tommy with warmth and affection, then turn to Adina with a courtesy so cold it burned. She developed a repertoire of small cruelties that individually seemed too minor to address, but collectively created an atmosphere of constant rejection. At a charity gala, Maria introduced Adina to a group of society women as Tommy's little mistake. She said it with a laugh, as though it were a joke, but her eyes were flat and cruel. Adina's hand tightened on Tommy's arm. He felt her body go rigid beside him. But she said nothing, just smiled that polite smile and nodded as the women looked her up and down with thinly veiled disdain. "Mother." "That's enough," Tommy said quietly later, when they had a moment alone. "Enough of what, darling?" "I was being friendly. You called her a mistake." "It was a joke, Tommy. Really, you're being far too sensitive. If Adina can't handle a little teasing, perhaps she's not quite suited for this family after all." Tommy wanted to argue, wanted to defend his wife with the fierceness she deserved, but his mother's face had that expression she wore when discussing matters she considered settled, and Tommy had never learned how to push past that expression. "She's my wife," he said instead. "I love her. Please try to accept that." "Of course I accept it, darling," Maria said, patting his cheek. "I'm trying very hard to make her feel welcome. It's not my fault if she's too insecure to appreciate my efforts." The gaslighting was masterful. Maria could make Tommy question his own perceptions, could twist reality until he doubted whether he had actually witnessed the cruelty he knew he had seen. At another family dinner, Maria served Adina last and gave her a noticeably smaller portion than anyone else. When Adina said nothing, Maria smiled sweetly and said, "I do hope that's enough for you, dear." "I wasn't sure of your appetite." Tommy saw his wife's cheeks flush with humiliation. He opened his mouth to say something, but his mother was already moving on, asking his Uncle Richard about his recent trip to Europe, and the moment passed. Later that night, Tommy found Adina crying in their bedroom. She was trying to be quiet about it, her face pressed into a pillow to muffle the sounds. "Adina," he said, gathering her into his arms. "Baby, please don't cry." "She humiliates me," Adina said through her tears. "Every single time. And you just sit there, Tommy. You never say anything." "I know. I'm sorry. I'll talk to her. You keep saying that, but you never do." She's my mother, Adina. I can't just... I'm your wife. The words came out raw and desperate. Doesn't that mean anything? It means everything, Tommy said, holding her tighter. You mean everything to me. Then why won't you defend me? Tommy had no answer that did not sound like cowardice. The truth was that challenging his mother felt like standing at the edge of a cliff, possible but terrifying. He had been raised to respect her, to defer to her judgment, to never cause her distress. Those patterns ran deep as bone. I love you, he said instead. I love you so much, Adina. Please believe that. She softened in his arms, and they held each other in the darkness. But Tommy felt the weight of his failure between them, and he hated himself for it. The cruelty escalated. At a family brunch, Maria arranged the seating so Adina was placed between two elderly relatives who were hard of hearing. They spoke across her as though she were not there, shouting to each other about people Adina did not know. At another event, Maria made a point of complimenting every woman in the room on their appearance, then looked at Adina and said, "And you look comfortable, dear." The word comfortable hung in the air like an insult. Adina had worn her best dress. She had spent an hour on her makeup and hair, and Maria had reduced it all to comfortable. Tommy saw tears gather in his wife's eyes, saw her blink them back, saw her spine straighten as she refused to let his mother see her break. He should have said something, should have stood up and told his mother exactly what he thought of her behavior, should have taken Adina's hand and walked out of that party and never looked back. Instead, he put his arm around his wife's waist and whispered, "You look beautiful. You always look beautiful." It was not enough. It was nowhere near enough. And Tommy knew it. The worst incident came at a formal dinner party Maria hosted at the estate. She had invited important people, politicians, philanthropists, society figures. Adina had been nervous all day, wanting desperately to make a good impression. During dinner, Maria turned to Adina with a smile that made Tommy's stomach clench with dread. "Adina, dear, would you mind helping in the kitchen? I'm afraid we're short-staffed this evening." The table went silent. Everyone understood what Maria had just done. She had reduced her daughter-in-law to a servant in front of a room full of the city's elite. Adina's face went pale. Her hands trembled as she set down her napkin. "Mother," Tommy said, his voice tight. "That's inappropriate." "Is it? I simply asked for a small favor, unless Adina feels she's above such things." The trap was perfect. If Adina refused, she would seem arrogant. If she complied, she would be humiliated. "Of course I can help," Adina said quietly, standing. Her dignity in that moment was breathtaking. She walked to the kitchen with her head high, while the guests exchanged uncomfortable glances. Tommy excused himself and followed her. He found her in the kitchen, leaning against the counter with her eyes closed. "We're leaving," he said. "No." "Adina, we don't have to stay here, and if we leave, she wins." Adina opened her eyes, and Tommy saw determination there alongside the hurt. "I won't give her that satisfaction." They stayed through dessert, through coffee, through the eternal evening that felt like torture. Adina helped serve with grace and poise, never letting anyone see how deeply the humiliation cut. In the car on the way home, Adina stared out the window in silence. Tommy tried to hold her hand, but she pulled away. "Why didn't you defend me?" she asked finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "I did. I told her it was inappropriate." "That's not defending me, Tommy. That's nothing. What do you want me to do?" "She's my mother, and I'm your wife." Adina turned to face him, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I love you. I love you so much it hurts. But your mother is destroying me piece by piece, and you just watch it happen." "I'll talk to her," Tommy said. The same useless promise he always made. "No, you won't. You never do." That night, they lay in bed, back to back, an invisible wall between them. Tommy listened to Adina cry softly into her pillow and hated himself more than he had ever hated anything. But the next morning, when his mother called and invited them to lunch, Tommy accepted, because it was easier than confronting her, because he told himself that things would eventually get better, Because he was a coward who loved his wife but loved his mother's approval more. And with each day that passed, with each casual cruelty and each failure to defend, Tommy felt Adina slipping away from him. Not in her love remained constant and fierce, but in her hope. He watched the light dim in her eyes, watched her shoulders curve inward, as though trying to make herself smaller and less noticeable. The honeymoon to Switzerland loomed ahead, and Tommy told himself that once they were away from his mother, everything would be fine. They would rediscover the joy they had felt when they first met. They would remember why they had fallen in love. He packed their bags with hope in his heart, never suspecting that the honeymoon would be the last happy time they would ever share, never imagining that his mother's hatred would follow them across an ocean and steal everything he had ever loved. Chapter 3. Switzerland and the phone call. The Swiss Alps rose around them like ancient cathedrals of stone and snow. Tommy stood on the balcony of their private chalet, watching dawn paint the mountains gold, and felt something close to peace for the first time in months. Behind him, through the open door, he could hear Adina humming while she made coffee. The sound filled him with such profound gratitude that his eyes stung. "You're going to freeze out there," Adina said, appearing beside him with 2 steaming mugs. She wore one of his sweaters, the sleeves hanging past her fingertips, and Tommy thought she had never looked more beautiful. "I was just thinking about how lucky I am," he said, taking the coffee and wrapping his free arm around her waist. "Lucky to be freezing?" "Lucky to be here with you." Tommy kissed the top of her head. "Lucky that you married me despite everything." Adina leaned into him. "I didn't marry you despite everything. I married you because of everything. Because of who you are, Tommy. Not your mother or your family or any of it. Just you." They had been in Switzerland for 4 days, and it felt like they had finally found their way back to each other. Away from Maria's poisonous presence, away from the constant tension and humiliation. They remembered how to laugh together, how to be the people they had been when they first fell in love. The previous day, they had hiked to a waterfall that tumbled down the mountainside in silver sheets. Adina had stood in the spray with her arms spread wide and her face tilted to the sky, and Tommy had taken a photograph he knew he would treasure forever. Last night, they had made love slowly and tenderly, and afterwards Adina had traced her fingers across his chest and whispered, "I want to have your children someday. I want to fill our house with love and laughter and tiny feet running everywhere." "Someday soon," Tommy had promised, and he meant it. They spent the morning exploring the nearby village, holding hands as they wandered through narrow streets lined with flower boxes and ancient stone buildings. Tommy bought Adina a music box that played a melody that made her cry for reasons she could not articulate, and she bought him a carved wooden bear that she said reminded her of him. "I'm nothing like a bear," Tommy protested. "You are. You're strong and protective and sometimes a little grumpy in the morning." Adina grinned at him. "My bear." They ate lunch at a cafe overlooking the valley, sharing a plate of local cheese and bread and wine that tasted like sunshine. Adina told Tommy about her students, about the little boy who had finally learned to read after struggling all year, about the girl who drew pictures of unicorns and left them on Adina's desk every morning. "They'll miss you while you're gone," Tommy said. "I'll miss them too, but I needed this. Needed us." Adina reached across the table to take his hand. "Thank you for bringing me here, for giving us this time." The driver Maria had arranged, Russell, was always hovering nearby. He was efficient and professional, but there was something about him that made Tommy uncomfortable. The way he watched Adina when he thought no one was looking. The way he appeared around corners without making a sound. But Tommy dismissed his unease. He was being paranoid. Russell had worked for his family for years. Maria trusted him completely. That afternoon, they returned to the chalet planning to rest before dinner. Adina wanted to take a bath, and Tommy wanted to sit by the fire and read. Simple domestic pleasures that felt like luxury. Tommy was halfway through a chapter when his phone rang. He saw his mother's name on the screen and felt his stomach tighten. She had promised not to call during the honeymoon, except in an emergency. "Hello? Tommy." His mother's voice was weak, barely above a whisper. "Tommy, you need to come home." Every muscle in his body went rigid. "What's wrong? What happened?" "It's my heart." Maria's breathing sounded labored and painful. "The doctor says—" "Tommy, I'm at the hospital." "They say it's serious. They say I might—" "You need to come home, please. I need you." Tommy's vision tunneled. The room seemed to spin. "I'm coming. I'm getting on the next flight. Just hold on, Mother. Just hold on." "Hurry," Maria whispered, and the line went dead. Tommy stood frozen, his phone still pressed to his ear. His mother was dying. His mother, who had raised him alone after his father passed, who had given him everything, who had shaped him into the man he was. She was dying, and he was half a world away. "Tommy?" Adina appeared in the doorway, her hair damp from the bath. "What's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." "It's my mother." Tommy's voice came from somewhere far away. "Her heart." "She's in the hospital. She's—" He could not finish the sentence. Adina crossed the room immediately and took his hands. Okay, we'll pack right now. We'll get to the airport and—" "No," Tommy said. "Not we, just me." "What?" "Tommy, I'm not letting you go through this alone. I need you to stay here." Tommy gripped her hands tightly. "The flights are complicated. It'll take forever to get 2 tickets. If I go alone, I can leave sooner. And there's no point in both of us cutting the honeymoon short. Your mother is in the hospital," Adina said firmly. "I should be with you." "I need to do this alone." Tommy pulled her close, breathing in the scent of her shampoo. "Please, Adina, stay here. Enjoy the chalet. Russell will take care of anything you need. I'll call you as soon as I know anything." "Tommy, please. You've had such a hard time with my family, with her. Take a few days for yourself. Rest, explore, and when I come back, we'll finish our honeymoon properly." He could feel Adina's reluctance in the tension of her body. But she loved him, and she knew how much his mother meant to him, even after everything. "Okay," she said finally, "but call me constantly. And Tommy, I hope she's all right, really. I know she doesn't like me, but I don't want her to be sick." Tommy kissed her deeply, pouring everything he felt into it. Love and fear and gratitude and desperation. "I love you more than anything in this world. I love you too. Now go, hurry." Tommy threw clothes into a bag without paying attention to what he packed. He called Russell and instructed him to stay at the chalet and assist Adina with anything she needed. He booked the first flight he could find, not caring about the cost. At the door, he turned back. Adina stood in the center of the room, looking suddenly small and alone. Something inside Tommy twisted. "I'll be back soon," he promised. "A few days at most. And then nothing will interrupt us again." "Go," Adina said, smiling through tears. "Your mother needs you." Tommy kissed her one more time, then forced himself to walk out the door. The car was already waiting. He climbed in and watched the chalet disappear behind him. Watched Adina standing in the doorway, growing smaller and smaller until she was just a speck, and then nothing at all. On the plane, Tommy tried to call his mother's hospital room, but could not get through. He tried her cell phone and got no answer. Panic clawed at his throat. He imagined arriving too late. Imagined his mother's last words spoken to an empty room. Imagined the crushing weight of that regret. The flight seemed to take forever. Tommy could not eat, could not sleep, could barely breathe. He replayed every conversation with his mother, every moment they had shared. He thought about the times he had disappointed her and promised himself he would make it right if only she survived. He thought about Adina, alone in Switzerland, and felt a flicker of guilt. But she would understand. She always understood. The plane touched down and Tommy ran through the airport. He took a taxi straight to the hospital, his heart hammering so hard he thought it might explode. He burst into the hospital, found the information desk, gave his mother's name. The receptionist looked confused. "I'm sorry, sir, but we have no record of a Maria Brinson being admitted." Tommy's world tilted. "That's impossible. She called me herself. She said, "Check again, please." The receptionist checked twice more. No Maria Brinson. No record of any admission in the past week. Tommy stood in the middle of the hospital lobby, his mind refusing to process what this meant. Then his phone rang. His mother's number. "Mother? Where are you?" "The hospital says." "Oh, darling, I'm at home." Maria's voice was strong and clear and utterly unconcerned. "I'm hosting a dinner party tonight. You should come. I've invited the Hendersons and the Whitakers. You remember Jonathan Whitaker? He just got back from Tokyo." Tommy could not speak, could not form words. "Darling, are you there?" "You said you were dying." His voice sounded hollow even to his own ears. "You said your heart dying. What on earth are you talking about? I'm perfectly fine. I just wanted you home, Tommy. You've been gone far too long, gallivanting around Europe with that girl. It's time you remembered your responsibilities." The phone slipped from Tommy's hand and clattered to the floor. Around him, the hospital continued its bustling routine, but Tommy stood frozen in a bubble of silence and horror. His mother had lied. She had faked a heart attack. She had manipulated him into abandoning his wife on their honeymoon. She had done it deliberately, knowing exactly what she was doing, not caring about the pain it would cause. Tommy picked up his phone with shaking hands and tried to call Adina. It rang and went to voicemail. He tried again and again, each time just her voice saying she could not come to the phone right now. Fear, cold and primal, flooded his veins. He called Russell. The driver answered on the first ring. "Mr. Brinson," Russell said, his voice strange. "I've been trying to reach you. Where's Adina?" "I don't know, sir. She left this morning. Said she wanted to drive herself to see the waterfalls one last time before you returned. But that was hours ago and she hasn't come back. I've been searching, but, Mr. Brinson, I'm worried." Tommy was already running back to his car, already booking another flight back to Switzerland, already cursing himself for every choice that had led to this moment. He had left his wife alone. He had chosen his manipulative mother over the woman he loved. And now Adina was missing, and Tommy's world was crumbling into dust and ashes. "Find her," Tommy said into the phone, his voice breaking. "Do whatever it takes. I'm coming back. Just find her." Chapter 4. The Trap. Russell stood at the window of his room in the chalet, watching the sun rise over the mountains, and felt nothing. He had worked for the Brinson family long enough to understand that loyalty was rewarded and questioning was punished. When Maria Brinson called with instructions, Russell listened. When she offered money, Russell accepted. When she explained what needed to be done, Russell did not ask why. The phone call had come 3 days before the honeymoon began. Maria's voice had been crisp and businesslike. "I need you to handle something for me, Russell. Something delicate. Of course, Mrs. Brinson. My son's wife will be joining him in Switzerland. I need her to decide to leave him, to go home, to understand that she doesn't belong in our family. How would you like me to accomplish that, ma'am?" "Scare her, make the trip miserable, create incidents that make her feel unsafe and unwelcome, but nothing that can be traced back to me or my son." "Can you do that?" Russell had hesitated. He had driven for the Brinsons for years. He had watched Tommy grow up. The idea of terrorizing a young woman on her honeymoon felt wrong in a way that made his stomach twist. But Maria had sensed his hesitation and addressed it immediately. "There will be a substantial bonus in this for you, Russell. Enough to retire comfortably. All I'm asking is that you make her uncomfortable, make her want to go home. Nothing more." The number she mentioned had made Russell's breath catch. Enough to retire. Enough to buy that small house he had always dreamed of. Enough to finally have something of his own. Nothing more than making her uncomfortable. He had confirmed. Nothing more. Just encourage her to leave. Russell had agreed. But when he arrived in Switzerland and saw Tommy and Adina together, saw the way they looked at each other, he felt the first stirrings of guilt. They were so clearly in love, so wrapped up in each other. The idea of disrupting that felt cruel. Still, a job was a job, And that money was real. He started small, moving Adina's belongings when she set them down, so she would think she was going crazy, serving her food that was subtly wrong, oversalted, undersweetened, making sure the heating in her room was always slightly too cold or too hot. Adina never complained. She smiled and thanked him politely, and Russell hated himself a little more each day. Then Maria called again. The night before Tommy left. "There's been a change of plans," she said, and something in her voice made Russell's blood run cold. "I need you to do more than make her uncomfortable, ma'am. I need her gone, permanently." Russell's hand tightened on the phone. "Mrs. Brinson, I don't understand what you're—" "Yes, you do. Don't play stupid, Russell. I need this woman out of my son's life. I've tried everything else. She's like a tick, burrowed in where she doesn't belong. I need you to make it look like an accident. You're asking me to— I'm asking you to solve a problem. The mountain roads are dangerous. Cars go off them all the time. It's tragic but not suspicious. Do you understand what I'm saying?" Russell understood perfectly. Maria Brinson was asking him to commit murder. "That's not what we agreed to," he said, his voice shaking. "You said make her uncomfortable. You never said, I'm doubling your payment. Triple it. Name your price, Russell. But this needs to happen." Russell closed his eyes, saw his small dream house slipping away, saw his comfortable retirement evaporating, but also saw his reflection in the mirror, a man who drove cars and followed orders, not a killer. "I can't do that, Mrs. Brinson. I won't." Silence on the other end of the line. Then Maria's voice, cold as winter. "You'll do it, or I'll make sure everyone knows you've been stealing from me. I have documentation. Falsified records showing you've been embezzling money for years. You'll go to prison, Russell. You'll lose everything, and you'll have nothing. You're lying, am I? Do you want to take that chance? Do you want to test me?" Russell knew she was not lying. Maria Brinson was many things, but careless was not one of them. If she said she had evidence, she had evidence. And in a legal battle between a wealthy widow and her driver, there was only ever one winner. "One day," Maria continued, "you have one day after Tommy leaves. Make it look like an accident. Do this, and you'll have more money than you ever dreamed of. Refuse, and you'll have nothing but a prison cell." The line went dead. Russell stood in his room for hours, wrestling with the decision. He thought about running, but where would he go? Maria Brinson's reach was long. He thought about warning Adina, but what would he say? "Your mother-in-law wants you dead?" She would never believe him. In the end, it was the prison threat that decided him. Russell was not a brave man. He was not a heroic man. He was just someone who wanted to survive, and Maria had made survival contingent on compliance. The next morning, after Tommy left in a panic about his mother's fake heart attack, Russell approached Adina with a smile he did not feel. "Mrs. Brinson, I was thinking you might enjoy seeing the village today. There's a wonderful market on Wednesdays, and the waterfall at the East Pass is particularly beautiful this time of year." Adina looked tired and worried. "I don't know if I'm up for sightseeing. I'm concerned about Tommy's mother." "Of course. But Mr. Brinson specifically asked me to keep you entertained while he's gone. He wouldn't want you spending the whole time worrying in the chalet." Adina smiled weakly. "He does worry about me worrying. The drive is beautiful. Perhaps it will take your mind off things?" "Okay, let me get my jacket." That night, while Adina slept, Russell went to work. He had learned basic mechanics in the military years ago. He knew which brake line to cut, how to make it look like simple wear rather than sabotage. He worked quickly and quietly, his hands shaking the entire time. When he finished, he stood beside the car and felt bile rise in his throat. He was really going to do this. He was really going to kill someone. He could still stop it. Could tell Adina the car was not safe. Could confess everything and deal with the consequences. But prison terrified him more than guilt. So Russell said nothing. The next morning, Adina came down wearing jeans and a sweater, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. She looked young and hopeful and completely trusting. "Ready to go?" she asked. Russell felt his mouth go dry. "Actually, I'm not feeling well this morning. Terrible headache." Would you mind driving yourself? I can give you directions. Adina's concern was immediate and genuine. Are you okay? Do you need medicine? I can stay here. No. I just need to rest. The waterfall is easy to find. Straight up the mountain road. Follow the signs. You can't miss it. Are you sure you'll be all right alone? Russell nodded, not trusting his voice. Okay, I'll be back in a few hours. Rest up. She climbed into the car, and Russell watched her drive away. He stood there long after the car disappeared around the bend, his fists clenched at his sides. He had done it. He had sent her to her death. Russell walked back into the chalet and sat in the empty living room. He waited for guilt to overwhelm him, for horror at what he had done. But mostly what he felt was numb. Hours passed. Russell called Maria to report that it was done. She had answered with satisfaction in her voice. Good. Now wait a few hours, then call Tommy in a panic. Tell him she went out alone and hasn't returned. Act worried. Play your part. Russell had done exactly as instructed. Called Tommy, acted panicked. Listened to the desperation in the young man's voice and felt absolutely nothing. Now, standing at the window, Russell wondered if he had ever felt anything at all, or if he had always been this hollow, this empty, this willing to destroy other people's lives to protect his own comfort. Far below, he could see the river where the car would have gone off the road, where Adina Brinson was probably dead, drowned in dark water, her body already miles downstream. Russell turned away from the window. He had a job to finish. He needed to drive up the mountain road and discover the guardrail damage. He needed to call emergency services. He needed to help search for the body that everyone would assume had been washed away. He needed to play his part perfectly, so that no one would ever suspect the truth, that Maria Brinson had ordered her daughter-in-law's murder, and Russell had carried it out without a second thought, all for money he would never truly be able to spend. Because whatever else he was smart enough to know that Maria would never let him live as a witness to her crime. He had killed Adina Brinson for nothing. The money would never come. The retirement would never happen. And someday, probably soon, Maria would find a way to eliminate the loose end that he represented. Russell laughed at his own stupidity. Then he grabbed his jacket and headed out to find the wreckage of the car he had sabotaged, and to begin the charade of the concerned employee who had tried so hard to save his employer's wife. Chapter 5. The Fisherman's Mercy. Henrik pulled his boat to shore just as dawn broke over the mountains, his weathered hands working the oars with the steady rhythm of 50 years on this river. His wife Astrid would be waiting with hot coffee and fresh bread, the way she had every morning of their marriage. He was securing the boat when he saw something strange caught in the reeds downstream. At first he thought it was debris, a deer perhaps, or a fallen tree. The river carried down all manner of things during spring runoff, but as Henrik walked closer, his heart began to hammer. Not debris, a person, a woman. Her dark hair spread in the shallow water like silk, her body twisted at an unnatural angle. Dear God, Henrik breathed, splashing into the cold water without thinking. He reached her in 3 strides and turned her over gently. She was not breathing. Her lips were blue. Her skin felt like ice. Henrik had pulled 4 bodies from this river over the decades. He knew what death looked like. This woman should have been dead, but something, instinct, hope, stubbornness, made him check for a pulse anyway. And there, beneath his calloused fingertips, he felt it, faint as a whisper, slow as winter. But there, she was alive. Henrik did not waste time questioning the miracle. He lifted the woman from the water, surprised by how little she weighed, and carried her up the riverbank toward his cottage. She was so cold that holding her was like embracing snow. Water streamed from her clothes and hair. "Astrid!" Henrik bellowed as he burst through the door. "Astrid, help me!" His wife appeared from the kitchen, saw the drowned woman in her husband's arms, and moved into action immediately. Together they had weathered storms and sickness and every hardship these mountains could provide. They knew how to work as a unit, Put her by the fire, Astrid commanded, already gathering blankets. Strip those wet clothes off her. We need to warm her slowly. They worked quickly. Hendrik removed the woman's soaking sweater and jeans, while Astrid dried her with towels and wrapped her in quilts. Her breathing was so shallow it was almost invisible. Her heartbeat barely existed. "Should I call for help?" Hendrik asked. Astrid shook her head. "The nearest hospital is 2 hours away. She'd die before we got there. We handle this ourselves." For 3 days the woman hovered between life and death. Hendrik and Astrid took turns sitting with her, keeping the fire blazing, checking her breathing, watching for any sign of change. They forced warm broth between her lips when they could. They changed her blankets when she shivered. They prayed in the quiet way of people who have seen too much hardship to believe in easy miracles. On the 4th day, the woman's eyes opened. She stared at the wooden ceiling above her with no recognition, no understanding. Her eyes were glassy and unfocused. "Hello, dear," Astrid said gently, leaning over her. "You're safe. You're in our home. Do you understand me?" The woman blinked slowly. Her mouth moved, trying to form words, but only a croak came out. "Don't try to talk yet," Astrid soothed. "You've been very sick. Just rest." But over the next week, as the woman's body slowly healed, it became clear that something was terribly wrong. She could speak, but she had no idea what to say. She could move, but she did not know where to go. She looked at Hendrik and Astrid with the confused trust of a child. "What's your name, dear?" Astrid asked her one morning. The woman stared at her hands, turning them over and over. "I don't know," she said finally. I can't remember." Hendrik and Astrid searched her clothes for identification, but found nothing. No wallet, no phone, no jewelry, except a plain gold wedding band. Her pockets held nothing but lint. "Do you remember how you ended up in the river?" Hendrik asked. The woman closed her eyes, concentrating. "I was driving. Something was wrong. The car wouldn't stop." And then she opened her eyes, terror flooding them. I don't remember anything." "It's all right," Astrid said, taking the woman's hand. "Amnesia is common after trauma. Your memories will probably come back." But weeks passed, and the woman's memories did not return. She knew how to speak and read. She knew how to dress herself and prepare food, but she did not know her name, her home, or anything about the life she had lived before the river. Hendrik hiked up to the mountain road and found the guardrail smashed, tire tracks leading straight over the edge. He reported it to the local police, but without a body or a vehicle identification, there was little they could do. Cars went off these mountain roads occasionally, usually tourists who did not respect the danger of the curves. The drivers rarely survived, and when they did not, their bodies were often never recovered. The police filed a report and moved on. Hendrik and Astrid did not know what else to do, so they kept the woman with them. They could not turn her out with no memory and no place to go. Their own children had grown and moved away years ago. The cottage felt too empty anyway. "What should we call you?" Astrid asked one evening as they sat by the fire. The woman touched her wedding ring, turning it slowly. "I don't know. Nothing feels right." "We'll just call you daughter then," Hendrik said gruffly, "until you remember." The woman smiled, and something in that smile was so sad that Astrid felt her heart break. Months passed. The woman, daughter, helped around the cottage. She learned to mend fishing nets and bake bread. She took long walks by the river and stood staring at the water as though it might tell her secrets. Sometimes she would come back crying without knowing why. "I dream," she told Astrid one night. "I dream of a man's face. He has kind eyes, and when I see him in my dreams, I feel like my heart is breaking, like I've lost something precious. But when I wake up, I can't remember his face anymore." "Your husband, perhaps," Astrid suggested gently, touching the ring on daughter's finger. "Maybe. I don't know." The seasons turned. Winter came and buried the mountains in snow. Spring returned and the river swelled with melt. Summer brought tourists and hikers who sometimes stopped at the cottage for directions. Daughter watched them from the window, wondering if any of them knew her, if any would recognize her. None did. She tried to remember. God, how she tried. She would sit for hours, concentrating, trying to pull anything from the blankness in her mind. Sometimes she would catch a fragment, a color, a smell, a snatch of music, but it would slip away before she could grasp it fully. "I think I was happy once," she told Henrik as they mended nets together. "I have this feeling deep down, like I knew what happiness felt like I knew how to love someone completely, but I can't remember who or why." "Maybe it's better not to remember," Henrik said quietly. "Maybe whatever life you had before is gone now. Maybe this is your chance to start fresh." But daughter shook her head. "I don't want to start fresh. I want to remember. I want to know who I was, who I am." Years passed this way. Daughter lived with Henrik and Astrid, helping them as they grew older and slower. She learned to catch fish and preserve vegetables and repair the roof when it leaked. She became part of the mountain, part of the river, part of the small community that rarely saw outsiders. But at night, she still dreamed of the man with kind eyes. And she still woke up crying, her hand pressed to her chest over the ache that never quite went away. She touched her wedding ring constantly, turning it round and round. Sometimes she would catch herself saying a name, Tommy, though she had no idea why or who Tommy was. The name felt important, felt like home. But the feeling had no context, no memory to attach to. 5 years became 7. 7 became 8. 8 became 9. And then one afternoon in late summer, daughter was in the village buying supplies when she saw a newspaper left on a cafe table. She picked it up idly, intending to use it to wrap the eggs she had purchased, but a photograph on the front page stopped her cold. A man's face, kind eyes, a serious expression, and beneath it, a headline about some American billionaire's upcoming wedding. Daughter stared at the photograph, her vision tunneling. Her heart began to race. Her hands shook so badly the newspaper rattled. She knew that face. She knew those eyes. She had dreamed them for nearly a decade. The cafe owner found her 10 minutes later, still standing frozen in place, staring at the newspaper, with tears streaming down her face. "Miss, are you all right?" "I know him," daughter whispered. "I know this man. His name is Tommy, and I think I love him. I think I've always loved him." The memories did not flood back all at once, but they came, piece by piece, like a puzzle assembling itself. The art gallery, the rooftop dinner, the proposal in the rain, the wedding, Switzerland, the phone call, the car with failing brakes, the terror, the river, and Tommy, always Tommy, his voice, his smile, the way he looked at her like she was his whole world. Daughter Adina stood in the cafe and felt her entire life crash back into her mind. Every moment, every memory, every second of the love she had thought she lost forever. She ran back to the cottage, burst through the door, and showed Henrik and Astrid the newspaper. "That's him," she said, her voice shaking with urgency and hope and terror. "That's my husband. That's Tommy. I have to go to him. I have to stop this wedding." Henrik looked at the date on the newspaper. The wedding was in 2 days. In New York, half a world away. "Then we'd better hurry," he said simply, reaching for his coat. "I'll drive you to the airport." Chapter 6. The Month of Searching. Tommy stood on the bank of the river where Adina's car had gone over, and he understood what it meant to stop being human. The Swiss rescue teams had been searching for 4 days. Divers went down into the dark water and came back up shaking their heads. Helicopters swept up and down the river valley. Search dogs followed scent trails that ended at the water's edge and went nowhere else. They found pieces. A car door, sections of twisted metal, one of Adina's shoes caught in branches 5 miles downstream, but no body, no Adina. The local police chief, a kind man named Weber, sat with Tommy on the riverbank the 5th morning. "Mr. Brinson, I need to be honest with you. The river current here is very strong. If your wife went into the water, she could be miles downstream by now. We've searched as far as we can, but what?" Tommy's voice was hollow. "But at some point we have to accept that we may never find her. I'm very sorry. You want me to give up? I want you to take care of yourself. You haven't slept in days. You're not eating. This grief is going to destroy you if you let it. Tommy looked at the man with eyes that felt like glass. My grief is all I have left of her. I'm not giving that up too. He refused to leave Switzerland, refused to return to New York, to his life, to anything resembling normal. He rented a room in the village and spent every day searching, walking the riverbanks, questioning locals, following every lead no matter how small. Russell had disappeared. The driver had left the chalet the day after Adina vanished, leaving no forwarding address. When Tommy tried to call him, the number was disconnected. When he asked his mother where Russell had gone, she said she had no idea. Something about that felt wrong, but Tommy could not focus on it. All his energy went into searching for Adina. Week 2 brought false hope. A woman's body was found downstream. Tommy had to identify it, had to look at a stranger's face and confirm it was not his wife. He felt both crushing relief and devastating disappointment. The villagers took pity on him. The woman who ran the bakery brought him food he did not eat. The owner of the inn where he stayed stopped charging him rent. People would see him walking the riverbanks and call out encouragement that felt like nails in his skin. "Mr. Brinson, you should rest today," they would say. "Mr. Brinson, you cannot search forever. Mr. Brinson, you must accept." But Tommy could not accept, would not accept. Adina was out there somewhere. She had to be. The alternative was unthinkable. His mother called constantly, first with false sympathy, then with impatience, finally with anger. "Tommy, you've been there nearly a month. You need to come home. You have responsibilities. The company needs you." "I don't care about the company. Don't be ridiculous. Your father built that company for you. You can't just abandon it because that woman drove off a cliff." The words hit Tommy like a physical blow. "Don't ever call her that woman again." "I'm sorry, darling, that was insensitive. But you must see reason. She's gone. You need to move on." "I will never move on." Maria's sigh was theatrical. "Then rot in Switzerland if that's what you want. But don't expect me to support this obsession." She hung up, and Tommy threw his phone into the river. Week 3 brought more fragments. A piece of cloth that might have been from Adina's jacket. A broken phone that turned out to belong to someone else. Each discovery felt like having his heart ripped out fresh. The police officially suspended the search. Chief Weber delivered the news personally, his expression full of regret. "We've done everything we can. I'm sorry, but we cannot keep using resources when the chance of finding her alive is essentially zero." "She's not dead." Tommy said it like a prayer, like a spell, like if he said it enough times, it would become true. "Mr. Brinson, she's not dead. I would know. I would feel it, and I don't feel it. I feel her out there. I feel her waiting for me." Chief Weber put a hand on Tommy's shoulder. "Denial is part of grief, but eventually you'll have to accept, get away from me." Tommy started searching alone. Every day from sunrise to sunset, he became a ghost in the village, the man who could not let go, the man who was destroying himself with hope. He found Henrik's cottage during the 4th week, an old fisherman and his wife who lived upstream from where the car went over. Tommy knocked on their door with a photograph of Adina in his hand. "Have you seen this woman? She went missing a month ago. Car accident. Please, if you've seen anything." Henrik looked at the photograph for a long time. Too long. Tommy's heart began to race. "I'm sorry," Henrik said finally. "I have not seen her." But something in the way he said it made Tommy pause, something in his eyes. Tommy wanted to push, wanted to demand the truth he sensed hovering just out of reach. But exhaustion and grief had worn him down to nothing. He thanked the man and left. He would later spend years wondering what would have happened if he had pushed harder in that moment, if he had seen through the lie, if he had searched the cottage and found Adina inside, recovering from injuries that had stolen her memory. But he did not push, did not search, and the moment passed. By the end of the month, Tommy was a shell. He had lost so much weight that his clothes hung on him. His eyes were sunken and haunted. His hands shook constantly. The villagers whispered that he had gone mad with grief. Chief Weber found him sitting by the river on the final day of the month, staring at the water as though it might give up its secrets. "Mr. Brinson, you need to go home. I can't leave her. She's not here. Whatever is left of your wife, it's not here. You're killing yourself for nothing. It's not nothing. She was everything." Weber sat beside him. "I lost my wife 8 years ago, cancer, and I can tell you from experience that grief like this will consume you if you let it. You have to choose to live. For her sake, if not your own. I don't know how to live without her. No one does at first. But you learn, slowly, painfully, but you learn." Tommy looked at the man, at the kindness in his worn face, and felt something crack inside him. He put his head in his hands and wept. Great, gasping sobs that tore from his chest like he was breaking apart from the inside. Weber sat with him until the crying stopped, until Tommy was empty and hollow and had nothing left to give. "Come on," Weber said gently. "Let me drive you to the airport." Tommy let himself be led away from the river. Let himself be driven through the mountains one final time. Let himself board a plane that would take him back to a life that felt like someone else's. As Switzerland disappeared beneath him, Tommy pressed his forehead to the window and whispered into the glass, "I'm sorry, Adina. I'm so sorry. I should have been there. I should have protected you. I should have never left you alone." The plane carried him away from the last place he had seen his wife alive. Away from the mountains and the river and the village, full of people who knew him only as the grieving man. Away from hope. He arrived back in New York to find his mother hosting a dinner party. She greeted him with a kiss that felt like betrayal. "Welcome home, darling. I'm so glad you finally come to your senses. Now wash up and join us. The Hendersons are asking about you." Tommy walked past her without a word, walked up to his room, walked into the closet where Adina's clothes still hung, smelling faintly of her perfume. He took one of her dresses down and held it to his face, and understood that this was what the rest of his life would be. This ache, this absence, this love that had nowhere to go. He sank to the floor of the closet, surrounded by the ghost of his wife, and let the darkness take him. Chapter 7. The Decade of Death. The first year after Adina died, because Tommy had to call it death, had to name the loss before it consumed him entirely. He attended a memorial service at the same church where they had married. Tommy sat in the front pew and stared at the photograph of Adina they had placed beside the empty casket. She smiled at him from the frame, frozen in a moment of joy he could barely remember feeling. The priest spoke words about eternal rest and God's mercy, and Tommy heard none of it. What he heard was silence. The silence where Adina's voice should have been. The silence where her laugh should have echoed. The silence that filled every room of their house and every corner of his mind. After the service, people approached with condolences that felt like accusations. She was so young. What a tragedy. At least she didn't suffer. But Tommy knew better. Adina had suffered. She had suffered in the moments before the car went over. She had suffered in the cold water. She had suffered alone, without him there to hold her, to comfort her, to save her. He went home to their empty house and understood that the rest of his life would be this silence. The second year, Tommy stopped going to work. His mother raged and pleaded and threatened, but Tommy could not bring himself to care. His father had built an empire, and Tommy was supposed to carry it forward, but what was the point? Why build anything when the only person he wanted to build it for was gone? Maria hired managers to run things. She took control herself, freezing Tommy out of decisions while pretending to protect his interests. Tommy let her. He was grateful for the absence of responsibility. He spent his days in the house, moving from room to room like a ghost. He kept Adina's things exactly as she had left them. Her coffee mug on the counter, her books on the nightstand, her favorite sweater draped over the chair where she had left it the morning they went to Switzerland. Sometimes he would put on her perfume just to remember what it felt like to have her near. Sometimes he would sleep in her side of the bed, trying to find some warmth left in the sheets. He was going mad, and he knew it. And he did not care. The third year brought the first round of women his mother tried to introduce. She would invite Tommy to dinner and surprise him with the daughter of a business associate or the niece of a family friend. These women would smile and make conversation, and Tommy would sit across from them feeling nothing. "Mother, I'm not interested," he said after the fifth such setup. "You can't mourn forever, Tommy. You're still a young man. You deserve happiness." I was happy. I'll never be happy again. That's depression talking. You need therapy. You need medication. I need you to leave me alone. But Maria did not leave him alone. Every few months, another woman, another dinner, another attempt to erase Adina from his life. The fifth year, Tommy started going to the cemetery. They had erected a memorial stone even though there was no body beneath it. Tommy would sit beside the empty grave and talk to his wife as though she could hear him. "I'm sorry," he would say. "I'm so sorry, Adina. I should have been there. I should have protected you. I should have never let my mother manipulate me into leaving." The stone never answered, but Tommy kept talking anyway. "I miss you. God, I miss you so much. It's like bleeding from a wound that never heals. I wake up every morning and forget for just a second that you're gone. And then I remember, and it's like losing you all over again." Other mourners at the cemetery began to recognize him. The man who talked to an empty grave. The man who could not let go. They gave him wide berth and whispered behind their hands, and Tommy did not care. The seventh year, Maria's campaign intensified. She had found the perfect candidate. Elaine, her niece from a distant branch of the family. Quiet, obedient, everything Adina had never been. "She's lovely, Tommy, and she understands our family. She would never cause the problems that the previous marriage caused." "Don't talk about Adina like she was a problem," Tommy said, his voice dangerously quiet. "I'm simply saying that Elaine would be a suitable match. She comes from good stock. She knows how to behave." "I don't care. You should care. You're not getting any younger. If you want children, if you want to continue the family line." "I don't want any of those things. I wanted Adina. That's all I ever wanted." Maria's expression hardened. "She's dead, Tommy, dead and gone. You need to accept that and move on. Get out. Tommy, oh, get out of my house." He threw a vase at the wall, and it shattered into 1,000 pieces. Maria left, her expression caught between fury and concern. The 8th year brought a terrible realization. Tommy was forgetting. Not big things, but small details. The exact shade of Adina's eyes, the specific cadence of her laugh, the way she hummed while she cooked. He had photographs, but they were flat and lifeless. They captured her image, but not her essence. Tommy spent hours staring at them, trying to burn every pixel into his memory, terrified of the day when he would look at her face and feel nothing. He started writing things down, memories of their time together, conversations they had had, the way she liked her coffee, the books she loved. The song she claimed was their song, even though they had never actually danced to it. The journal filled with pages of desperate remembering. Tommy carried it everywhere, adding to it whenever a memory surfaced. It became his most precious possession, proof that she had existed, proof that they had loved each other. The 9th year, Maria collapsed at a family dinner. She clutched her chest and went pale, and for a moment Tommy thought she was faking again, manipulating him the way she had in Switzerland. But this time it was real. The doctors diagnosed a serious heart condition, not immediately life-threatening but concerning. Maria needed rest, needed to reduce stress, needed to see her son settled and happy. "Your obsession with that dead woman is killing me," Maria said from her hospital bed. "Is that what you want? To lose your mother too?" Tommy felt trapped between grief and guilt. He loved his mother despite everything, despite her cruelty to Adina, despite her manipulation. She was all the family he had left. "I'll try," he said finally. "I'll try to move forward." Maria's smile was victorious. She knew she had won. The 10th year brought the final crushing blow. Dr. Wesley called Tommy into his office with a grave expression. "Your mother's condition has worsened. The stress is affecting her heart in ways we can't completely control. She's obsessed with seeing you married, settled, and that obsession is literally shortening her life." "What are you telling me?" "I'm telling you that if you want your mother to live, you need to give her what she wants." "I know that's not fair. I know it's not what you want to hear, but I'm giving you the medical reality. Reduce her stress or lose her." Tommy sat in that office and felt the last door slam shut on his happiness. He could keep mourning Adina and lose his mother, or he could betray Adina's memory and give his mother peace. There was no good choice. No right answer, just suffering in one direction or another. That night, Tommy went to Adina's room, the room he had kept exactly as she left it for a decade. He sat among her things and talked to her ghost. "I don't know what to do," he said. "My mother is dying, and the doctor says the only thing that will save her is seeing me move on, seeing me marry someone else. And I can't. Adina, I can't do this. I can't betray you like that." The room offered no answer, just silence and shadows and the overwhelming presence of absence. "But if I don't, my mother dies. And I'll have to live with that too. I'll have to know I chose your memory over her life." Tommy put his head in his hands and wept. For Adina, for himself, for the impossible situation that was tearing him apart. "Forgive me," he whispered to the empty room. "Whatever I do, please forgive me." The decision made itself in the end. Not because Tommy wanted it, but because he saw no other path forward. He called his mother and told her he would consider meeting Elaine, really meeting her, maybe eventually marrying her. Maria's joy was audible through the phone. "Oh, Tommy, you've made me so happy. You're finally ready to live again." But Tommy was not ready to live. He was simply ready to exist, ready to go through the motions of a life that would never feel real again. He agreed to the engagement, agreed to the wedding planning, agreed to all of it with the numb compliance of a man who had already died inside. And far away, in a cottage in the Swiss mountains, Adina was beginning to remember everything she had lost. Chapter 8, The Doctor's Ultimatum. Tommy watched his mother crumple at the dinner table like a puppet with cut strings. One moment, Maria was holding court, discussing the upcoming charity gala with Elaine and several family friends. The next, she gasped and clutched at her chest, her face draining of color. "Mother!" Tommy was beside her in seconds, catching her before she hit the floor. "Someone call an ambulance." "Naiti." The next hours blurred together in a nightmare of hospital waiting rooms and worried doctors. Elaine sat beside Tommy, occasionally touching his arm in what was meant to be comfort but felt like an invasion. Tommy could not make himself care enough to pull away. Dr. Wesley emerged from the examination room looking older than his years. "Mr. Brinson, I need to speak with you privately." They walked to a small consultation room. Tommy sat because his legs felt suddenly unreliable. "How bad is it?" Tommy asked. Dr. Wesley pulled up Maria's charts on the computer. "Your mother's heart condition has progressed significantly. The stress and strain on her cardiovascular system has caused deterioration that we cannot reverse. The damage is done. Can you operate? There must be something. There are treatments, yes, medications, lifestyle changes. But Mr. Brinson, I need to be completely honest with you. Your mother's prognosis is not good. She has perhaps a year, maybe less." The words hit Tommy like physical blows. "A year, maybe less," Dr. Wesley repeated. "And that year will be significantly shortened if she continues to experience the level of anxiety and stress she's been under." "What stress?" "She lives comfortably. She has everything she needs." Dr. Wesley looked at Tommy with something like pity. "She has an obsession, Mr. Brinson, an obsession with seeing you remarried. She talks about it constantly. It consumes her thoughts, and that level of fixation, that constant state of agitation, is quite literally killing her." Tommy felt something cold settle in his stomach. "You're saying that worrying about my marriage is affecting her health?" I'm saying it's the primary factor in the rapid deterioration of her condition. Mr. Brinson, I'm going to be frank with you in a way that might seem inappropriate. But time is short, and I think you need to hear this. Go ahead. If you want your mother to live, you need to marry that young woman in the waiting room. You need to give your mother the peace of mind she craves. Because if you don't, I estimate she has 6 months at most. The stress will kill her. Tommy stared at the doctor, understanding the trap closing around him. You're asking me to sacrifice my own happiness to extend her life. I'm giving you medical facts. What you do with those facts is your decision. After the doctor left, Tommy sat alone in the consultation room. Through the small window, he could see Elaine in the waiting room, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She was pretty in an unremarkable way, pleasant, suitable, everything his mother wanted, nothing like Adina. Tommy closed his eyes and saw his wife's face, not from photographs but from memory. The way she looked the morning they left for Switzerland, her eyes bright with excitement. The way she smiled when she thought he was not watching. The way she slept with one hand tucked under her cheek. I can't do this to you, Tommy whispered. I can't betray you like this. But the doctor's words echoed in his mind. 6 months. His mother had 6 months if he did nothing. And as much as she had hurt Adina, as much as she had driven them apart, she was still his mother. The woman who raised him alone after his father died. The woman who had given him everything, even if she had taken everything away too. Tommy returned to the waiting room. Elaine stood when she saw him, concern written across her features. How is she? Not good. They're keeping her overnight for observation. Oh, Tommy, I'm so sorry. Elaine touched his arm again. And this time Tommy noticed that her hand was warm and solid and completely wrong. But wrong did not matter anymore. Nothing mattered except the impossible choice before him. That night, Tommy drove home in a daze. The house was dark and empty. It had been dark and empty for 10 years, but tonight the darkness felt suffocating. He walked through the rooms without turning on lights, past the kitchen where Adina used to sing while she cooked, past the living room where they had danced without music, up the stairs to the bedroom they had shared. Tommy stood in the doorway of Adina's preserved room and felt something break inside him. I don't know what to do, he said to the darkness. My mother is dying, and the only thing that will save her is if I destroy us. Destroy what we had. Move on like you never existed. The room remained silent. Adina's ghost offered no advice, no forgiveness, no answers. Tommy walked to her closet and took down the dress she had worn on their first date. He held it to his face and breathed in, but the scent of her perfume had faded years ago. All that remained was the memory of memory, layers removed from the truth. If you were here, what would you tell me to do? Tommy asked the dress, the room, the universe that had taken her. Would you tell me to let my mother die? Or would you tell me to save her, even if it costs your memory? He thought about Adina's kindness, her capacity for forgiveness, the way she had endured Maria's cruelty with grace because she loved Tommy enough to try. You'd tell me to save her, Tommy said, his voice breaking. You'd tell me that life is precious, that I can't let someone die if I have the power to prevent it. That's who you were. That's who you are. Tommy sank to the floor of the closet, surrounded by Adina's clothes, and made his decision. He would marry Elaine. He would give his mother the peace she needed. He would betray the greatest love of his life to save a woman who had destroyed it. The morning brought no clarity, only resolve born from desperation. Tommy called Elaine and asked her to meet him for coffee. She arrived looking nervous and hopeful. Tommy felt nothing but numb determination. Elaine, I need to be honest with you about something. Okay. I don't love you. I will probably never love you. My heart died with my wife, and there's nothing left to give. Elaine's face fell, but she did not look surprised. I know. You know? Tommy, I've seen the way you look through me. Like I'm not even there. I know you're only considering this marriage because of Maria, and you're still willing. Elaine looked down at her hands. I've loved you since we were children. I know you don't remember me, but I remember you. At family gatherings, you were always kind to me. You treated me like I mattered. And I know this isn't how I dreamed it would be, but I'm willing to take whatever part of you I can have, even if it's just your name." Tommy felt pity wash over him. Pity for this woman who was willing to settle for so little. Pity for himself, about to enter a marriage that was already dead. "If we do this, I need you to understand something. I will never remove my wife's things from the house. I will never stop visiting her grave. I will never pretend she didn't exist. I wouldn't ask you to. And I will never love you. I'm sorry, but I can't lie about that." Elaine's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. "I understand. Then I'll marry you, for my mother's sake. Only for that." They sat in silence, two people agreeing to a lifetime of mutual unhappiness. Tommy thought about how his mother would celebrate, and how Adina would weep, and how he was about to step into a future that felt like a tomb. That evening, Tommy told Maria his decision. She was still in the hospital, looking frail and small in the white bed. "I'm going to marry Elaine," he said without preamble. Maria's entire face lit up. "Oh, Tommy, you've made me so happy. When? When will the wedding be?" "Soon. As soon as you're well enough to attend." "I'll be well enough tomorrow if that's what it takes." Maria reached for his hand. "You're doing the right thing, darling. You're finally moving on, finally living again." But Tommy was not living. He was simply existing in a way that might keep his mother alive a little longer. Over the next weeks, wedding plans accelerated with manic energy. Maria, suddenly full of vigor that the doctor attributed to reduced stress, threw herself into organizing. Flowers, music, guest lists, everything had to be perfect. Tommy went through the motions. He showed up for tastings and said everything tasted fine. He looked at invitations and said they all looked appropriate. He tried on suits and agreed to whatever Elaine and his mother suggested. At night, he returned to Adina's room and apologized to her ghost. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. This isn't what I want, but I can't let my mother die. I can't carry that guilt. Please, Adina, please understand." The wedding date was set. Invitations were sent. The machinery of the event ground forward with inexorable momentum. Tommy felt like a man being led to execution. Each day brought him closer to the moment when he would stand before a crowd and promise to love someone he did not love, while his true wife's memory watched from the shadows. The night before the wedding, Tommy stood in his room and looked at his reflection. He barely recognized himself. The man in the mirror looked older than his years, hollowed out, empty. He pulled out Adina's photograph, the one he had carried in his wallet for 10 years. Her smile was bright and genuine. She looked at the camera, at him, with such love that it physically hurt to see. "Tomorrow I betray you," Tommy whispered to the photograph. "Tomorrow I break every promise I made, and I need you to know that it's not because I've moved on. It's not because I've forgotten you. It's because I'm trapped, Adina. I'm trapped, and I don't know how to get free." He slid the photograph into his pocket, the closest he could get to bringing her to his wedding. Then Tommy lay down in the bed he had once shared with her, and he did not sleep. He simply waited for morning to come and take everything that was left of his soul. Somewhere across the ocean, Adina was boarding a plane to New York, her heart pounding with desperate hope that she was not too late. Chapter 9. The Wedding Day. The Brinson estate transformed into something from a fairy tale. If fairy tales were built on graves and broken promises, white flowers covered every surface, roses, lilies, orchids shipped from South America at enormous expense. A string quartet played softly as guests arrived in their finest clothes. The late summer sun painted everything gold and perfect and completely false. Tommy stood in his room, adjusting his tie for the 100th time, and felt like a stranger in his own skin. His hands shook. His reflection in the mirror looked like a man attending his own funeral. Through the window he could see the chairs assembled on the lawn, hundreds of them, filled with people who thought they were witnessing something joyful. They would applaud and smile and believe they were watching a man start over, find happiness again, move forward with his life. None of them would know the truth, that every step toward that altar was a step away from the only thing that had ever mattered. "You look handsome," Maria said from the doorway. She wore an elegant gown the color of champagne, her face flushed with pleasure. The heart condition that had been killing her seemed to have vanished. Love and satisfaction had accomplished what medicine could not. "Thank you, Mother. I'm so proud of you. Tommy, so proud that you finally let go of the past and embraced the future." Tommy did not correct her, did not tell her that he had let go of nothing, that Adina's photograph was in his pocket right now, pressed against his heart, that this wedding was not a beginning but an ending. "It's almost time," Maria said. "Everyone is waiting." Tommy took one last look at his room, at the door that led to Adina's preserved room. He wanted to go there one final time, to say goodbye to the space that held her memory. But Maria was watching, and the clock was ticking, and there was no more time for goodbyes. He followed his mother downstairs and through the house to the terrace that overlooked the garden. The guests rose when they saw him. The quartet swelled into something triumphant. Tommy walked down the aisle between chairs filled with strangers and family members who thought they knew what was happening. At the altar, the officiant smiled warmly. Behind him, the garden stretched out in manicured perfection. Everything was beautiful and terrible and wrong. Elaine's father appeared with his daughter on his arm. She wore a white dress that was elegant and traditional. Her face was serene behind her veil, giving nothing away. Tommy wondered if she was as terrified as he was, if she lay awake last night knowing that they were both walking into a prison. She reached the altar. Her father placed her hand in Tommy's. Tommy felt the contact and felt nothing. No spark, no warmth. Just skin touching skin, with no meaning behind it. "Dearly beloved," the officiant began, his voice carrying across the assembled crowd. "We are gathered here today to witness the union of Tommy Brinson and Elaine Whitmore in holy matrimony." The words washed over Tommy without meaning. He stood at the altar and thought about another wedding. A small ceremony where Adina wore a simple dress and Tommy's voice broke when he said his vows, where love felt like something real and tangible and precious. "Marriage is a sacred bond," the officiant continued, "a promise to love and cherish through all circumstances, a covenant not to be entered into lightly." Tommy's hands started shaking. He clasped them together to hide it. Elaine noticed and gave him a small, sad smile that said she understood. The officiant droned on about commitment and partnership and forever. Each word felt like a nail being driven into a coffin. Tommy's coffin. The death of everything he had been with Adina. If anyone can show just cause why these two should not be joined in holy matrimony, speak now or forever. Hold your peace. The pause was ceremonial. No one ever actually objected at weddings. Tommy closed his eyes and waited for the moment to pass. Then someone screamed. Tommy's eyes flew open. A commotion erupted at the back of the garden. Guards were struggling with someone at the gate. A woman's voice, hoarse and desperate, cut through the musical interlude. "Let me through! Please, I need to get to him." Tommy's entire body went rigid. That voice. He knew that voice. Knew it the way he knew his own heartbeat, his own breath. But it was impossible. It could not be. The guards continued to struggle. The guests craned their necks to see what was happening. Maria stood from her seat, her face darkening with anger at the disruption. Then the woman broke through. She was thin, too thin. Her clothes were worn and simple. Her hair was longer than Tommy remembered, loose around her shoulders. She was barefoot, having apparently lost her shoes in the struggle with the guards. But her face was the face that haunted Tommy's dreams. The face he had been forgetting, little by little, detail by detail. The face he thought he would never see again, outside of photographs and memory. "Adina," Tommy whispered. The word came out broken. Impossible. The guests erupted in gasps and exclamations. People stood from their seats. Maria made a sound like something dying. Adina stood at the edge of the ceremony, swaying on her feet. Her eyes, those eyes Tommy had tried so hard to remember, locked on his. Tears streamed down her face. "Tommy," she said, and her voice shattered what was left of his world. "Tommy, I'm here. I'm alive. I came back." Time stopped. Tommy could not move, could not breathe, could not process what he was seeing. This was a hallucination, a breakdown. His grief had finally driven him completely insane. But then Adina took a step forward, and another, and she was real. She was solid. She was here. Tommy moved without conscious thought. He left the altar, left Elaine standing alone, left the officiant with his mouth hanging open. He ran toward Adina, his legs carrying him across the garden that separated them. He reached her and stopped, terrified that if he touched her she would disappear, that she was a ghost, a dream, anything but real. "Adina." His voice broke on her name. "I'm real," she said, reading his fear. "Tommy, I'm real. I'm here." Tommy reached out with shaking hands and touched her face, felt warm skin, felt tears, felt her lean into his touch with a sob that echoed through the silent garden. Then he pulled her into his arms and held her with such desperate strength that he worried he might hurt her. But he could not let go, could not release her, could not risk her vanishing again. "You're alive," Tommy said against her hair. "You're alive, you're alive, you're alive." "I'm sorry," Adina sobbed into his chest. "I'm so sorry it took so long. I couldn't remember. I couldn't remember anything. But I remember now. I remember you. I remember us." Tommy pulled back just enough to look at her face, to confirm that this was real, that she was really here, really in his arms, really alive. "I thought you were dead," he said. "I searched for you. I searched for a month. I never stopped hoping. I was in the river," Adina said, her words tumbling over each other. "The brakes failed. The car went over. I thought I was going to die. But a fisherman found me. Henrik and Astrid. They saved me. But I couldn't remember. I couldn't remember anything for so long. Behind them, chaos reigned. Guests shouting questions. Maria being supported by relatives, as she looked like she might collapse. Elaine standing alone at the altar, tears streaming down her face, but something like relief in her expression. But Tommy saw none of it. Saw only Adina. "I love you," he said. "God, Adina, I never stopped loving you. Not for a second. Not for a breath." "I love you too," Adina whispered. "Even when I couldn't remember your name, I loved you. I dreamed about you. I knew something was missing. I knew I'd lost something precious." Tommy kissed her then. Kissed her like a man finding water after dying of thirst. Kissed her like she was air and he had been drowning. Kissed her with 10 years of grief and longing and desperate hope. The garden erupted in confused applause and shocked exclamations. Some guests started crying. Others pulled out phones to call friends and share the unbelievable news. When Tommy finally pulled back, he kept Adina close, kept his arms around her like a shield, kept her safe the way he should have all those years ago. "I'll never let you go again," he promised. "Never. I don't care what happens. I don't care who tries to separate us. I will never let you go." Adina collapsed against him. The exhaustion of travel and emotion finally caught up to her. Tommy caught her, lifted her easily despite his own shaking limbs. "I need to get her inside," he said to no one in particular. "She needs rest. She needs—" "Tommy!" Maria's voice cut through the confusion. She stood nearby, supported by 2 cousins, her face ashen. "Tommy, what is happening?" Tommy looked at his mother, really looked at her, and in that moment 10 years of suppressed anger finally surfaced. "What's happening is that my wife has come home," he said coldly. "My wife, who you never wanted me to marry. My wife, who you made miserable. My wife, who went over a cliff in Switzerland after you faked a heart attack to get me to leave her alone." Maria's face went even paler. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do." Tommy held Adina closer. "And we're going to find out exactly what happened. But right now I need to take care of my wife, my real wife." He carried Adina into the house, away from the wreckage of the wedding, away from the crowds of shocked guests. He took her upstairs to their room, the room he had not been able to sleep in for 10 years, and laid her gently on the bed. Adina looked up at him with exhausted eyes. "I need to tell you something about Switzerland. About what happened." "Later," Tommy said, brushing hair from her face. "Rest now, just rest. I'm here. I'm not leaving you." "Russell," Adina whispered as her eyes drifted shut. "It was Russell. The brakes. He did something to the brakes." Tommy went very still. "What did you say?" But Adina had fallen asleep, her body finally giving in to the exhaustion of her journey. Tommy sat beside her and watched her breathe. Real, alive, here. Then he pulled out his phone and made a single call. "I need you to find Russell," he said. "The driver who worked for my mother. Find him now, and call the police. I think there's been a crime." As Tommy hung up, Elaine appeared in the doorway, still in her wedding dress, still crying quietly. "I'm sorry," Tommy said, and he meant it. "Don't be," Elaine wiped her eyes. "I saw your face when you saw her. That's what love looks like, Tommy. What we were about to do wasn't love. It was just existing. Thank you for understanding." "I hope she's okay." Elaine looked at Adina, sleeping peacefully. "I hope you both get the ending you deserve." Then she turned and left, and Tommy heard her footsteps fade down the hallway. Tommy turned back to Adina, his wife, his love, his everything that he thought he had lost forever. He took her hand and held it gently, feeling her pulse beating steadily beneath his fingers. "Whatever happens next," he whispered, "we face it together. I promise you, Adina, together." Chapter 10. Justice and Rebirth. The courtroom felt too small to contain the storm of emotions swirling within its walls. Media crews packed the gallery. Reporters scribbled notes. Cameras were banned inside, but outside the building, news vans created a traffic jam that stretched for blocks. The story had captured national attention. The wife returned from the dead, the cancelled wedding, the accusations of attempted murder. Tommy sat in the front row, Adina beside him. She had gained some weight in the weeks since her return, but she still looked fragile. Still looked like someone who had survived something impossible. Her hand rested in Tommy's, their fingers intertwined. On the other side of the aisle, Maria sat alone. Her family had distanced themselves once the accusations came to light. Her friends had fallen silent. She wore a simple dress and looked smaller than Tommy had ever seen her. Russell was already in custody. He had been found hiding in a cheap motel 3 states away, paranoid and desperate. When the police arrested him, he had broken down immediately. The confession poured out of him like poison draining from a wound. Now he sat at the defendant's table, his shoulders hunched. His lawyer looked resigned. There was no defense to mount when the accused had confessed everything to the police in a videotaped interview. The prosecutor stood and addressed the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is a simple case despite its extraordinary circumstances. Russell Drake was paid by Maria Brinson to sabotage a vehicle, knowing that Adina Brinson would be driving it. He cut the brake lines. He sent her up a mountain road. He knew what would happen. This is attempted murder, plain and clear. The trial lasted 3 days. Tommy and Adina listened to Russell describe how Maria had called him, how she had threatened him with false embezzlement charges, how he had tampered with the car while Adina slept, how he had watched her drive away knowing she would not come back. "I'm sorry," Russell said from the stand, his voice hollow. "I'm so sorry. I was weak and scared, and I let money and threats control me. Mrs. Brinson almost died because of what I did." The prosecutor showed bank records, payments from Maria to Russell, large sums transferred in the days before and after Adina's disappearance. When it was Maria's turn to testify, she took the stand with her head high. She wore her dignity like armor. "Mrs. Brinson, did you pay Russell Drake to sabotage your daughter-in-law's vehicle?" "I paid him to scare her," Maria said. "Not to kill her. I wanted her to leave my son. She was wrong for him. But I never wanted her dead. Yet you paid Russell right after she disappeared. A substantial bonus on top of his regular salary. He completed the job I asked for." The job of attempted murder. The job of scaring her away. Maria's voice rose. I never told him to tamper with the car. That was his own decision. His own evil choice. The prosecutor pulled up the phone records. 3 calls from Maria to Russell in the 24 hours before Adina's accident. The last one lasting 17 minutes. What did you discuss in that 17-minute phone call, Mrs. Brinson? I don't recall. You don't recall a lengthy conversation the day before your daughter-in-law nearly died? It was a long time ago. But Russell's testimony contradicted her. He described the conversation in detail, the threats, the increased payment, the explicit instruction to make it look like an accident. She told me to make sure the brakes would fail on the mountain road, Russell said, his voice shaking. She said it had to look like an accident, that no one could trace it back to her. Those were her exact words. Maria's lawyer tried to discredit Russell, tried to paint him as a liar, trying to reduce his own sentence by implicating others. But the bank records told their own story. The phone calls told their own story. Maria's history of cruelty to Adina told its own story. Tommy was called to testify about his mother's treatment of Adina, about the fake heart attack that had lured him away from Switzerland, about the years of manipulation and control. My mother wanted Adina gone from my life, Tommy said clearly. She made that clear from the day we married. She humiliated her, isolated her, made her feel unwelcome. And when none of that worked, when Adina stayed because she loved me despite everything, my mother found another way. Adina testified last. She described the car ride up the mountain, the moment she realized the brakes had failed, the terror as the vehicle went over the edge, the cold water closing over her head. I thought I was going to die, Adina said quietly. I thought I would never see my husband again, never tell him how much I loved him. And the last thought I had before the water took me was that I wished I had been stronger, wished I had fought harder against his mother's hatred. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Tommy and Adina waited in a private room. They did not speak much, just held each other and tried to breathe. When the verdict came, they returned to the courtroom. The jury filed in. The 4 women stood. In the case of the state versus Russell Drake, on the charge of attempted murder, we find the defendant guilty. Russell's head dropped. His lawyer touched his shoulder with resignation. In the case of the state versus Maria Brinson, on the charge of conspiracy to commit murder, we find the defendant guilty. The courtroom erupted. Maria remained still, her face pale but composed. She looked at Tommy once, and he saw something like regret in her eyes. But it was too late for regret, too late for apologies. The judge called for order. When the room quieted, he addressed the defendants. Mr. Drake, you have shown remorse for your actions. You have cooperated fully with the investigation. However, you deliberately tampered with a vehicle knowing it would put someone in mortal danger. The court sentences you to 20 years in prison. Russell nodded, accepting his fate. The judge turned to Maria. Mrs. Brinson, you orchestrated this crime. You manipulated and threatened Mr. Drake into carrying out your wishes. You showed no remorse throughout this trial. Your only regret seems to be that your plan failed. The court sentences you to 14 years in prison. Maria stood as straight as steel. Your Honor, I would like to make a statement. You may speak. Maria turned to look at Tommy and Adina. For the first time since the trial began, her composure cracked. I loved my son, she said, her voice shaking. Everything I did was because I loved him. I wanted him to have the best life possible, the best wife, the best future. And I thought, her voice broke, I thought she was wrong for him. I thought she would ruin everything. Mother, Tommy started, but Maria held up a hand. But I was wrong. I see that now. I see how you look at her, Tommy. I see what she means to you. And I realize that in trying to protect you, I destroyed you. I took away the one thing that made you happy. Tears streamed down Maria's face. Adina, I am so sorry. I was cruel and evil, and I almost killed you. And I will spend the rest of my life knowing that I am the villain in my own son's story. She turned back to the judge. I accept my sentence. I accept my fate. And I hope that someday, somehow, my son can forgive." Maria gasped. Her hand flew to her chest. Her face contorted in pain. "Mother!" Tommy was on his feet. Maria collapsed. The courtroom exploded into chaos. Bailiffs rushed forward. Someone shouted for a doctor. Tommy pushed through the crowd and fell to his knees beside his mother. Her hand clutched at his jacket. Her breathing came in short, desperate gasps. "Tommy," she whispered. "I'm sorry. So sorry. It's okay. You're going to be okay. Just hold on." But Maria's grip was weakening. Her eyes were losing focus. "Love her," Maria breathed. "Love her the way I should have loved her. Don't waste the time you have. Mother, please, be happy, Tommy. That's all I ever really wanted." Her hand went limp. Her eyes stared at nothing. Tommy felt for a pulse and found nothing. The paramedics arrived and pushed him aside, but he already knew. His mother was gone. The heart condition that she had been fighting for so long had finally claimed her. The stress of the trial, the verdict, the weight of her own guilt, it had been too much. Tommy stood in the middle of the courtroom, surrounded by chaos, and felt numb. His mother had destroyed his life and then died asking for forgiveness. He did not know what to feel. Did not know if he even had room left inside for more grief. Adina appeared beside him and took his hand. Said nothing. Just stood with him while his mother's body was covered with a sheet and carried away. The judge postponed the rest of the proceedings. The courtroom slowly emptied. Tommy and Adina were left alone with a handful of officials and the echoing silence. "Are you okay?" Adina asked softly. Tommy looked at her. His wife, his everything. The woman his mother had tried to kill. The woman who stood beside him now, offering comfort when she had every right to celebrate. "I don't know," he said honestly. "I loved her. Despite everything, I loved her. And now she's gone and I don't know how to feel about that." "That's okay. You don't have to know right now." They left the courthouse through a back entrance to avoid the media. Tommy took Adina home, their home, and they sat together in the room that had once been her shrine. "I should feel something," Tommy said. "Relief or anger or grief. But I just feel empty." "You feel whatever you need to feel," Adina said. "She was your mother. She hurt us terribly, but she was still your mother. Those things can both be true." Tommy pulled Adina close and held her. "I'm sorry she never loved you the way you deserved. I'm sorry you had to choose between us." "I chose wrong," Tommy said. "I should have defended you from the beginning. I should have stood up to her. I failed you." Adina pulled back to look at him. "You loved me. That's what matters. You searched for me when I was lost. You never gave up. That's not failure, Tommy. That's love." They held each other as the sun set outside, painting the room in shades of gold and amber. And slowly, Tommy began to feel something other than numbness. He began to feel hope. The weeks that followed were strange and surreal. Maria was buried in the family plot beside Tommy's father. The funeral was small. Most of the family stayed away, embarrassed by the scandal. Tommy stood at the grave and tried to find words for what he felt, but there were no words. Just complicated grief for a complicated woman. Adina stood beside him through it all, never judging, never demanding, just present and solid and real. Russell was transferred to prison to begin his sentence. Tommy never spoke to him again. 3 months after the trial, Tommy and Adina stood in a small chapel with only a handful of people present. Henrik and Astrid had flown in from Switzerland. Elaine came, having found peace with how things had ended. A few close friends filled the remaining pews. "We're already married," Adina had said when Tommy suggested the ceremony. "We never stopped being married. I know, but I want to do it again. I want to make those promises to you again, and mean them even more than I did the first time." So they stood before a priest and renewed their vows. Tommy's voice did not break this time. It rang out clear and strong. "Adina, 10 years ago I promised to love you for as long as I drew breath. I kept that promise even when the world said you were gone. I kept it through grief and loneliness and darkness. And now, With you standing here in front of me, alive and real and mine again, I make that same promise. But this time I add to it. I promise to never let anyone make you feel less than the extraordinary woman you are. I promise to defend you, to protect you, to choose you every single day for the rest of our lives. Adina's vows were equally powerful. Tommy, I lost everything. My memory, my identity, my past. But even in that darkness, I never lost the feeling of being loved by you. It lived in my bones. It lived in my dreams. It lived in every moment, even when I couldn't remember your name. And now that I have you back, I promise to never take a single day for granted. I promise to love you fiercely and completely. I promise to build a life with you that honors everything we survived to get here. They exchanged simple gold bands, kissed while their small audience applauded, and walked out of the chapel hand in hand, ready to finally begin the life they should have had a decade ago. 1 year later, Adina gave birth to a daughter. Tommy held the tiny, perfect baby and wept. "She has your eyes," he said to Adina. "She has your stubbornness," Adina replied with a tired smile. She didn't want to come out. They named her Hope. It felt appropriate. The celebration at the Brinson estate 6 weeks later was joyful and loud. Tommy had invited everyone who mattered. Friends and family filled the gardens where the failed wedding had taken place. But this time there was no tension, no hidden cruelty, just genuine happiness. Henrik and Astrid sat at the head table, positions of honor. They looked overwhelmed by the grandeur but deeply pleased. Astrid held baby Hope and cooed to her in Swiss German, while Henrik beamed with pride. Tommy stood to give a speech, tapping his glass for attention. The crowd quieted. "I want to thank everyone for coming today to celebrate Hope's arrival. But more than that, I want to honor 2 people who gave me back everything I thought I'd lost." He gestured to Henrik and Astrid. "These 2 people found my wife dying by a river. They saved her life. They cared for her when she had no memory, no identity, no way to repay them. They treated her like their own daughter. And when her memory returned, they helped her find her way back to me." Tommy's voice grew thick with emotion. "Without Henrik and Astrid, I would have spent the rest of my life alone. My daughter would never have been born. The love story that defines my entire existence would have ended in tragedy. They didn't just save Adina's life. They saved mine too." The crowd applauded. Henrik wiped tears from his weathered face. Astrid clutched Adina's hand across the table. "There's no way to repay what you've done," Tommy continued. "But I want you to know that you will always be family to us. This house is your house. This child is your grandchild. And our love, our life, our happiness, it exists because of your kindness." Henrik stood, his voice gruff with emotion. "We did what anyone would do. We saw someone who needed help and we helped." "That's not true," Adina said, standing as well. "Most people would have called the authorities and moved on. You took me into your home. You cared for me like I was your own. You gave me a family when I had nothing. And when I needed to come home, you didn't hesitate to help me. That's not what anyone would do. That's what angels do." Astrid began to cry in earnest. Henrik put his arm around his wife, and they stood together, these simple people who had changed everything through one act of extraordinary compassion. The party continued late into the evening. Tommy watched Adina move through the crowd with Hope in her arms, accepting congratulations and sharing joy. He watched Henrik and Astrid surrounded by well-wishers, finally understanding how profoundly their actions had rippled outward. As the sun set, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Tommy found himself standing at the edge of the garden. Adina appeared beside him, Hope sleeping peacefully in her arms. "What are you thinking about?" Adina asked. "About how close we came to losing all of this," Tommy said. "If Henrik had been fishing somewhere else that day, if the current had carried you further downstream, if you'd never remembered. We came so close to never having this moment, but we did have it. We're here. We made it." Tommy looked at his wife and daughter, silhouetted against the sunset, and felt something he hadn't felt in 10 years. Pure, uncomplicated joy. "My mother was wrong about everything," he said. "She thought you weren't good enough for me. But the truth is, I was never good enough for you. You survived impossible things. You found your way back to me across an ocean and through lost memories. You forgave me for failing to protect you. You gave me another chance at happiness. Adina, you're the strongest person I've ever known. We're strong together, Adina corrected. That's what matters. Not who's stronger or who's better. Just that we're together. They stood in comfortable silence, watching their guests celebrate below. Hendrik was teaching someone to properly tie a fishing knot. Astrid was showing photos of their cottage in Switzerland. Elaine was cooing over Hope with genuine affection, having found her own happiness in letting go. Do you think Hope will understand someday? Tommy asked. When we tell her the story of how we almost lost each other? I think she'll understand that love is worth fighting for, Adina said. That it's worth surviving for. That it can bring you back from the edge of death itself if you hold on tight enough. Tommy kissed the top of Hope's head, then kissed Adina's lips. I love you, more than I have words for. I love you too. Always have. Always will. As darkness fell and stars began to appear, the party transformed. Lanterns were lit, music played. People danced on the lawn, where Tommy had almost married the wrong woman. Where Adina had appeared like a miracle. Where their story had been given a second chance. Tommy took Adina's hand and led her to the center of the dance floor. Hope slept between them as they swayed to the music, the three of them moving as one unit. Around them, their friends and family danced and laughed and celebrated life. Henrik and Astrid watched from their table, holding hands, their eyes bright with tears of joy. They had saved a life and, in doing so, had created this moment. This family, this love. Tommy looked at the people surrounding him, his wife, his daughter, the strangers who had become saviors, the community that had gathered to celebrate Hope's arrival and understood something fundamental about survival. It wasn't about being strong alone. It wasn't about never falling. It wasn't about avoiding pain or tragedy or loss. It was about finding people who would pull you from the river when you were drowning, who would hold you when you were broken, who would help you remember who you were when you had forgotten, who would stand beside you and say that love was worth every sacrifice, every tear, every moment of darkness. It was about choosing to love fiercely even when the world tried to tear that love apart. It was about fighting your way back home, no matter how far the current carried you. It was about second chances and stubborn hope, and refusing to accept that any love story worth telling ends in tragedy. Tommy held his wife and daughter close as the music swelled around them. Above, the stars shone down like witnesses to a miracle. And for the first time in 10 years, Tommy Brinson felt completely, utterly, perfectly at peace. In the end, Maria's cruelty had taken 10 years, but it couldn't take forever. Because some loves are stronger than death, deeper than rivers, and more enduring than any grave. Tommy and Adina had learned that the hard way, but they had learned it together. And that made all the difference.